Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2023 movie titled The Devil Comes to Kansas City. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. After a long day tending to the ranch, Paul hurried home as the sun sank low on the horizon. Upon entering, he was met with the warm smiles of his wife, Sadie, and their daughter, Rebecca. It was a fortunate coincidence that Sadie had just finished preparing dinner, eager for the family to share a meal together. As they gathered around the table, Sadie proposed an evening plan. She wanted Paul to accompany them to a theater show in Kansas City. However, Paul had to decline. He was tasked with moving 100 cattle to the next town that night. Not wanting to dampen their spirits, he encouraged Sadie and Rebecca to go without him, even suggesting they could stay over at a childhood friend's house if they returned too late. Reluctantly, Sadie agreed, and they set off, leaving Paul to manage his responsibilities. Shortly after, Paul received an unexpected visit from his co-worker Isaac, who arrived to help load the cattle. Without wasting any time, Paul bid farewell to Sadie and Rebecca, reminding them to stay safe and keep him updated. As the sun continued to set, Paul focused on guiding the herd while Sadie and Rebecca prepared for their night out in Kansas City. Meanwhile, in Kansas City, a mafia boss named Klain was losing his grip on his criminal operations. Enraged by a failed job that allowed several kidnapped women to escape, he executed one of his own men in cold blood. He then ordered his enforcer, Maz, to find new victims to replace those who had escaped. Afterward, Klain retreated into a side room with his advisor to strategize on expanding their illicit network. Back at home, Paul went to his father Richard's house to borrow a truck, realizing he didn't have enough vehicles to transport all the cattle. Inside, Richard pulled him into the living room to watch a soccer match and catch up. Just then, Paul's phone lit up with a video call from Rebecca, who informed him that she and Sadie were almost at the theater's parking lot. Paul reiterated his concerns for their safety and urged them to keep in touch. Moments later, as Rebecca and Sadie arrived at the parking lot still on video call with Paul, two men approached them, Maz and one of Klain's thugs. Despite Sadie's attempts to fend them off, the men swiftly overpowered her and seized both her and Rebecca. Paul watched in horror as chaos unfolded before his eyes. In a desperate attempt to fight back, Sadie was shot by Maz without hesitation. Paul's heart shattered as he helplessly witnessed his wife being killed and his daughter taken away. Richard quickly intervened, urging Paul not to succumb to despair. This was not the time for grief, it was time for action. He pushed Paul to return home, arm himself, and track down those responsible. It became evident that Paul and Richard were not just ordinary ranchers, they were former American mercenaries with a history of executing dangerous missions for the government. Without hesitation, Paul rushed home to grab his weapons while Richard reached out to two of Paul's closest friends, instructing them to come immediately. 10 minutes later, Isaac and Bowen arrived, their faces etched with concern. Richard wasted no time, delivering the devastating news. Rebecca had been kidnapped in Kansas City, and Sadie was dead. They needed to help Paul retrieve his daughter and ensure those responsible faced justice. Bowen hesitated, questioning why they shouldn't involve the police, but Richard quickly dismissed that idea. Calling the authorities would only squander precious time and resources. As Paul returned, armed and resolute, Richard outlined their plan. He insisted that Paul wouldn't face this alone. He, Bowen, Isaac, and Richard himself would pursue this mission together until Rebecca was safe and her captors were eliminated. However, Paul resisted, urging his father to stay behind due to his age. He was determined to tackle this with Bowen and Isaac if they were willing. Fortunately, neither man hesitated to join him. United in purpose, the three set off for Kansas City, driven by the fierce determination to bring Rebecca home by any means necessary. In that moment, the tranquility of their ranch life shattered. A tempest of vengeance loomed on the horizon, far removed from cattle and fences. This was the dawning of the devil come to Kansas City. Meanwhile, two of Klain's men callously disposed of Sadie's body in a secluded spot, leaving no trace behind. In another part of town, Rebecca found herself trapped in a dark room alongside Maz and another kidnapped woman named Lorene. Seeing the youth in Rebecca's eyes, Lorene felt a pang of sympathy for her plight. Across town, Paul, Bowen, and Isaac rolled into Kansas City, their hearts heavy with purpose. Paul's first instinct was to revisit the theater area, the last place he had seen his family. Memories flooded back, Sadie shot dead, Rebecca dragged away from that very gravel lot. As he scanned the surroundings, a clown caught his attention. Paul approached him for directions to the gravel parking lot, but the clown attempted to extort money first. Frustrated, Paul lost his temper and used force to make his intentions clear. Terrified, the clown quickly agreed to lead them there. Thanks to his cooperation, they finally located Sadie's car. Paul instructed his friends to spread out and search for any clues while he examined the vehicle, hoping it would provide a lead on Rebecca's whereabouts. Soon after, Paul spotted Maz and one of his men lurking nearby, clearly hunting for more victims. When Paul called out to them, they bolted in panic. Instinct kicked in. Paul fired a shot that struck Maz's partner dead on the spot while Maz narrowly escaped. Just then, Bowen and Isaac arrived on the scene. Without hesitation, Paul loaded the wounded man into their vehicle for questioning later. A half hour later, they dragged him into an abandoned warehouse. As Paul got a good look at his face, recognition hit him. This was the same thug who had seized Sadie during that horrific video call. Consumed by rage, Paul lunged at him without mercy. Bowen and Isaac tried to restrain him, but Paul was beyond reason, unleashing a brutal assault as retribution for Sadie's death. After venting his fury, Paul finally compelled the man to speak. With his last breath, the thug managed to whisper one word, Westport, before succumbing to his injuries. Witnessing Paul's descent into violence was overwhelming for Bowen. He realized he could no longer be part of this grim mission and chose to leave. Paul didn't try to stop him. Instead, he turned to Isaac and suggested he could leave too if he wished. But Isaac chose to stay. During the drive, Paul instructed him to look up Westport, which turned out to be a dental clinic on the outskirts of Kansas City. Wasting no time, they sped straight there. Upon arrival, Paul and Isaac burst through the doors, guns drawn, only to discover that the clinic was anything but ordinary. It was a front, teeming with addicts lost in a haze of drugs and chaos. Before long, they cornered the owner, a dentist named Bovel, who attempted to flee at the sight of them. Paul was quicker, seizing Bovel before he could escape and thrusting a photo of Rebecca into his face, demanding answers. Under the intense pressure, Bovel revealed that Rebecca was being held at Klane's print factory, a place that masqueraded as a legitimate business but was actually a hub for human trafficking and smuggling. Paul pressed further, wanting to understand Bovel's involvement in this dark world. That's when Bovel reluctantly confessed he had a 20% stake in all of Klane's illicit operations. With that knowledge in hand, Paul forced Bovel to lead them directly to the factory. However, as they stepped out of the clinic, Klane's men were lying in wait. In a tense standoff, Paul grabbed Bovel and threatened his life unless Klane backed down. Klane merely laughed, stating that Bovel's death would actually save him money. Without hesitation, he ordered Maz to eliminate them all, including Bovel. A brutal gunfight erupted. Outnumbered, Paul took a bullet and collapsed into unconsciousness, while Isaac and Bovel fell victim right there on the street. When the chaos subsided, Klane commanded Maz to drag Paul back to their base for the final blow. At the hideout, two of Klane's men pulled Paul from the car, but before they could take him inside, a street musician suddenly intervened, wielding his guitar like a weapon and dispatching them with surprising skill. He then scooped up Paul and vanished into the night. When Paul regained consciousness, he found himself in a small house with his wounds hastily bandaged. Stepping outside to see who had rescued him, he was taken aback to find Randall, his childhood friend, the very one he had once spoken of to Sadie. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Paul thanked Randall for saving his life. But Randall quickly pointed out that Paul still had bullets lodged inside him and needed proper medical attention. He insisted on taking Paul to the hospital immediately. Yet Paul refused. He had no time to waste in a hospital bed. He explained that he was on a mission to hunt down Klane, the man responsible for Sadie's murder and Rebecca's abduction. Before he could elaborate further, Randall urged him back inside, away from the harsh sun. Inside, Randall's concern was palpable as he cautioned Paul against charging ahead in his fragile state. Then he revealed something crucial. He had a friend who was a shaman, a healer renowned for mending any wound with just a touch. If Paul wanted a real chance at recovery and retribution, this was his best option. Though skeptical at first, Paul recognized the urgency of his situation and agreed to go with Randall. With no time to lose, they set off together in search of the shaman who might hold the key to Paul's survival and vengeance. Before long, Paul and Randall arrived at the shaman's unusual place of operation, a bar run by a man named Kirk. Unlike most shamans who secluded themselves in remote and mystical locations, Kirk exuded an air of style and charisma that set him apart. Without hesitation, Randall introduced Paul and explained the dire situation they faced. Upon learning that Paul needed healing from gunshot wounds, Kirk acknowledged he could help, but there was a price. Paul would have to join his sect. Faced with no viable alternatives, Paul agreed, insisting on immediate healing. With a mere touch, Kirk erased every wound from Paul's body, leaving even his bloodied clothes pristine. Stunned by the sheer power of this healer living in America, Paul vowed to join Kirk's sect, but only after he rescued Rebecca and dismantled Klane's operation. Kirk accepted this condition, as long as Paul remained true to his word. With their agreement in place, Paul and Randall set out, determined to take down Klane's entire network that very day. Outside, Randall expressed his commitment to the cause, revealing his own vendetta against Klane, a man who had wreaked havoc in Kansas City for far too long. Together, they headed towards Klane's print factory, hoping to find Rebecca within its walls. Upon arrival, they were met with a daunting sight: the compound teemed with Klane's guards. Lacking weapons, their first step was to locate a traveling arms dealer to equip themselves for the impending confrontation. Before long, Paul was painting war stripes on his face, embodying the spirit of battle, while Randall stealthily maneuvered around to the back entrance. In a matter of moments, Paul launched his assault, systematically taking down Klane's men as he fought his way through the compound. Meanwhile, Rebecca was trapped in a desperate situation, suffering from a life-threatening fever. Lorene tried to assist her by calling for a guard to bring medicine, but instead of help, the guard delivered drugs that swiftly claimed Rebecca's life. Consumed by rage, Lorene retaliated. She attacked the guard, killed him in cold blood, seized his weapon, and made her escape. Outside, she gunned down several more guards before commandeering a car and speeding away. Back at the factory, Randall had successfully infiltrated the building and was fending off thugs armed only with his guitar. In a parallel confrontation, Paul found himself face to face with Maz. Their brutal struggle raged on until Paul finally overcame Maz, putting him down for good. Fueled by adrenaline, Paul stormed into Klane's office, only to discover it empty. Enraged and desperate for vengeance, he shouted for Klane to reveal himself. At that moment, Klane entered the room and shot Paul in the leg. With a malevolent smirk, Klane commended Paul's bravery and relentless pursuit of revenge before delivering the devastating news: Rebecca was already dead. This revelation ignited an uncontrollable fury within Paul. Despite the pain of his injury, he charged at Klane, but his wounds hindered him, and soon Klane had him cornered, poised to deliver the final blow. Then, unexpectedly, a single gunshot echoed through the room. Klane collapsed, shot in the back by none other than Randall. Rushing to Paul's side, Randall desperately tried to keep him conscious, but it was too late. As Paul slipped away from the world of the living, he found himself dreaming of Sadie and Rebecca, both radiant in white. He ran toward them, tears streaming down his face as he lamented his inability to save them. Without resistance, he joined them in their ethereal realm, donning white clothes himself, a poignant sign that he had departed this life for good. Witnessing Paul's final breath shattered Randall's heart. He walked away in profound grief, burdened by the weight of loss. Thank you for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.